Everybody, Invisiblekatana here doing my review for the War for Cybertron. I guess technically it's part 2, it's not really season 2, but War for Cybertron part 2, Earthrise. I think Siege is technically in the title. I don't remember. The title is so insanely long. But War for Cybertron part 2, Earthrise. So, spoilers will be in the second half, because there are so many to talk about. But to keep it simple, I'm gonna just draw like a random graph with my finger, because this is kind of how it went. It was like, okay, season's good. And then it was about the last 3 episodes, and it was like, what the fuck? This was amazing. I can't talk about it without going into spoilers, but there's 2 specific episodes. It was, I think, 3 episodes before the last, they did some wild stuff that I was just like, that's crazy. That in itself was crazy. And then the way it ended, I was like, that's even crazier. And then literally the final scene of this season was so amazing to me. I was watching on my iPad at work. If I knew that I would have that reaction, I would have recorded. Like I literally saw it. It ended, and then it just, like Netflix is just like, okay, here's something else you might like, which means there's not another episode. And I literally grabbed the iPad. I was like, no, please, because it ended so insanely well. I recommend this season. I think this season was definitely better than the first season, actually. I enjoyed the first season, but I think the stuff that they did, splitting up the characters, made for a better season overall. First off, Megatron. This guy right here, this is Megatron's series. Like, there's not been another Transformers show that I can think of, at least, that's been like, man, the good side of Megatron. Or at least, that more human side, I guess, if you will. Because we got to see him do some really cool stuff. And they touched on it for sure in the first one. But that's kind of the whole thing with Megatron. And I realized, this is something I never realized, but it's insanely obvious. Megatron is the exact same character as Zod from Superman. They're the same person. They are the same person. When they get to Earth, it's like, I don't care. I want my planet back. I'm better than you, so I'm going to make your planet my new planet. That's Zod. That's Megatron. But the perfect comparison, and this show proves it, Krypton is a prequel series. Unfortunately, it got canceled, but Zod was in that show. And so he wasn't on Earth. He wasn't just like, I'm going to kill everybody and I'm going to turn this place into the new Krypton. He was on Krypton and it was like, I'm going to help my people. It's like, he's going to rise up, if you will. So he was a general. He was a commander. And it was just like, he's a guy that people could rally behind. And it was the exact same thing with Megatron in this show. And they showed that. And it was like, this is so cool. He's still bad. Like, there's obviously both those characters, same thing. Still bad because ultimately they make decisions where it's like, I'm gonna save all these people, all of my people, but there's always that other half, because as soon as someone else is against either Zod or Megatron, it's like, I care so much for my people, but I'm gonna murder you. I'm gonna kill all of you over there, and as soon as I help all of my people that I care so much about, we're gonna murder all of you. We're gonna enslave you, probably, and then we'll murder you eventually. Like, piece by piece, we'll probably just, stomp you all out and you'll no longer exist. That's pretty much how they are. They're really good to the people that are on their side, and they technically, their ultimate goal is to do something good. But the way they get there is so bad, it's like they're clearly the villain here. It's like you can want something, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. It's that sort of thing. And that's both those characters. And this season really showed that for Megatron. And it's like, I like that. Because that's, you can definitely get glimpses of that for his character for sure. But this show, they're not on Earth. They're on Cybertron. He talks to his own people. He does things. Excuse me. Early on in the season, he does something. I'll talk about it in spoilers, but we see him have to make a decision. And typically, it's like, oh, it's Megatron. He's just going to do this thing. He's going to do his evil thing. But it's not instantly that, because he's making a choice for his people, because he does care about them, because technically they're on his side of the war. But still, he goes through tough decisions. And I was like, that I appreciate. Something I sadly don't appreciate as much is Optimus Prime in this show. So, season 1, I was like, okay, Optimus Prime is cool. It's like, it's him kind of coming into his own. He's a new Prime. He's not really Orion Pax and stuff. He's Optimus Prime, but he's still kind of getting used to it. He doesn't know exactly what the right move is. And I was like, okay, that's cool. I kind of like that idea. I enjoy the concept of him learning, and Megatron was always, the battler, so he was more adept at war. Like, he was like, I make the tough choices. That's kind of always been their character. Optimus doesn't kill. It's kind of, real Batman, not going by the, DC movies, but, Batman versus pretty much Joker. Like, this guy won't kill, this guy will always kill. That's kind of how it is. And so, I enjoyed that in season 1. In this season, though, I don't know if I liked it as much, because it was cool at first. It was like, okay, I love how they split the characters off. Alita 1 kind of takes over and she leads the rest of the Autobots that have stayed behind. She has her thing where she's going up against the Decepticons, and then they have kind of the second half of the season pretty much. It kind of transitions, and then we start to roll into the other half of the Autobots. So it's Optimus, Ironhide, Bumblebee, others. Admittedly, I forgot who else, but the three like main Autobots I remember, and then others. And so they go into it, and I was like, oh, I like this idea. They're searching for the Allsparks that Optimus kind of tossed, and it was like they go through some pretty good ideas. Optimus, however, as much as it's entertaining to watch the season, he's just kind of whiny, and that's the thing I noticed. And I think that was the thing, and this is specifically the writing for the character. I'm trying to think of how to really put it. When he's mad, he says too much. I think that's the best way I could possibly describe it. And I think it's because they kind of veered away from being like, hey, let's get Peter Cullen, who is, and I mentioned this in the last season, the voice actor sounds a lot like, classic Optimus Prime Peter Cullen, who's been Optimus from, G1 Transformers. But not, he's like, it's almost like right there. And it was weird at first, and then I eventually got used to it, which I found out after the season, like that was actually a thing where they basically kind of didn't want them on there because they didn't want to have to pay as much money. So that was kind of effed up. But I think a part of that was them not really getting Optimus as much as far as like emotionally, because he would yell and it was just weird. Like he would say so much. Like Optimus, when he yells, he'll say like two things, like two words. It'll be like two words. It won't be like a full giant sentence. But in this season, it's like Optimus versus Megatron in some of these scenes is like Optimus is just screaming, and I'm like, it just sounds weird because it's a dude yelling, and then they have the voice effect over it. Because I don't think that guy was actually doing that specific voice. Personally speaking, I could be wrong because like Peter Cullen actually does the voice. That guy, I was like, when he was yelling, that's when I kind of noticed, and I was like, I don't think he's actually doing that full voice. I feel like they kind of put something over him, and once again, I could be wrong, but it was just the way he was screaming. I was like, it's weird because it sounds like it's high pitched because he was yelling, and I was like, this sounds like he's high pitched yelling, and then they put like a deep voice mod over it, but you can still tell that technically the person underneath was like yelling and it was high pitched. And I was like, that sounds really weird. For one, it sounds weird to hear that from Optimus because any sort of high pitched is just, it's Optimus, so that sounds off. And two, he was saying too much. Like the way he would do it, it was like he would have long drawn out sentences, and I'm like, that's not really Optimus's thing. If he's mad, it's still very calm, or he'll be like, no, and like that's his thing. Like no is like his big grand scream. And so when he would yell sometimes at Megatron, I was like, it just seems off. It just feels weird because he wouldn't yell that much in general. He just doesn't yell in that way, even though this is him younger, so it still kind of fits in the story, but it just felt weird, and then it just sounded weird. So it kind of just, those two elements, which are literally the two main things, like the character being written that way and then how the character sounds, both those things seeming off is really, really bad. And it was only when he was yelling. It was literally, that was it. It was like, I feel like Optimus wouldn't yell like this, and then Optimus sounds weird when he yells, and that was it. Like it just threw it out every time he was mad and he would yell like that. I was like, this sounds wrong, and it just didn't sound right to me, so I didn't enjoy it as much. So that was like probably the one gripe whole season, was just like Optimus yelling is not good. And that was pretty much it. Other than that, I think all I can do is talk about spoilers. So that is officially it. I would recommend this season, aside from like the minute stuff with Optimus. I think this whole season was really, really good, and especially I'll get into it with spoilers, but if you're like a real deep, old school Transformers fan, this was like a holy crap. This was almost like Transformers Prime type stuff. Like just like this season, I was like, man, I don't think I felt this way about Transformers since Prime. And that, I love that show. That's my favorite Transformers show, which, I don't know, I might have to rewatch that. Either that or Beast Wars, since Beast Wars I grew up with. So it's one of those two, but Prime is just so good. It's so freaking good. But that's it for non-spoilers. So if you have not seen this season, I highly recommend you check it out. I do think it was really, really good. Even if you aren't like the craziest fan of Transformers, I do still think it was a really good season overall. So I would recommend it personally. But getting into spoilers, oh my goodness. So we go this part of the chart where I was just like losing my effing mind. Beast Wars Transformers. Man, if you have not seen it, I've done a review. I love my little reflective thing there. I did a review for every single episode for this show, so you can find those really old YouTube videos of mine. I'll put one as an in slate, the first episode, but I reviewed every single episode of that like it was probably like 4 or 5 years ago now. Because that's how much I love this show. It had been since I was, maybe 9, since I even actually seen the show all the way through. And I was like, I bought it off Amazon, bought the whole show, and I was like, I want to rewatch Beast Wars. And that show is amazing. It's so good. It holds up so insanely well. Like graphically, maybe not. I don't think it's the worst ever, but just story wise, it's like wow, it connects so freaking well to G1 Transformers. It's insane. And then this season kind of comes in. I was like, season 1, okay, War for Cybertron. I have the video games. I mentioned that in my last review. It's like it's obviously different even from the video games. So I was like, all right, they're kind of doing the War for Cybertron, slightly different canon or whatever. It's still cool. Like they're still on Cybertron fighting for Cybertron. And then season 2 hits, and I was like, okay. Alita 1 doing her thing, Megatron's doing his thing. Eventually he gets to the ship and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Like he gets to Optimus, and then they duke it out. First off, the Quintessons, I lost my mind because I was hoping that they would show the Quintessons this season. And when they first get captured and they have like the 4 voices go like excellent, I was like, no way. And of course it was the Quintessons. I was hoping we'd see like the little shark robots. I was kind of hoping they would do that, but they didn't. Quintessons, utterly amazing in this season. Like they were straight up like horror villains, and the one voice, that was the one thing I didn't like because I felt like they did it so fast. It was in like the first episode they got introduced, and then the one head killed all the other heads, which I didn't even know was a thing. So admittedly, it was an insane moment where I was like, I didn't know that was possible. I thought they were all technically like a weird hive mind, which they kind of are, but they are still separate. But that was cool. I was like, wow. Also, those other heads suck because I'm like, you're all on one body. Like 5 of you control 5 tentacles. You guys couldn't just be like, stop the laser and then just flick it. But whatever, they all got their faces chopped off, and then the Quintesson became one. So that was crazy. I was like, I've never seen the Quintesson as like a horror villain, but that's what the Quintesson was in this season. So I love that, and it's like killing people and like mind controlling their bodies like zombies. I was like, the Quintesson is pretty sick in this season. So I love that for sure. We get to see the Nemesis pop up, so that was amazing. Alita 1 was super cool. Her conversation with Megatron, we find out that Megatron knew her. He called her by a different name, but I forgot what it was. But he also called her by like, it was such a normal name. It was like such a normal human name. I was like, why is that her name? I can't remember what it is. It was Ariel. I think that's what it was. And I was like, Ariel is such an actual human name. I thought that didn't even make sense. I was like, why the F did they use Ariel as a name? Because everyone is Optimus Prime, Megatron, Alita 1. That sounds like a Transformers name. Like, Ariel, I know who you are. It's like, Ariel is not human. She should not have a name like Ariel. It just sounded weird to me. Like, Bumblebee is about as close as we can get to something that's, like, truly human. And it's not, not as crazy. But that was just like, hey, Ariel. And I was like, that's so weird. That felt weird. But aside from that, everything was cool. Like, her being the leader and, helping out the Decepticons. Another thing, didn't hate it, but thought it was funny. They might do it in season 3. The Decepticons always end up helping out the Autobots in like a last minute switch. And it's only because the Autobots help some random Decepticon. They're like, no, we're the good guys, so we're going to help out these Decepticons, despite the fact that they're Decepticons. And it's like, you didn't have to do that for us. It's like, hey, we're all in this war. We need to truly, get through this together because Megatron is the actual bad guy. And they did that in the first season, and it was a specific Decepticon that they saved that time. But it was the exact same thing. It was like they save somebody, even though they don't have to. And then when they need the help, that same Decepticon comes in at the last minute and is like, I got your back. And I'm like, I hope they don't do that in season 3 because they've done it twice now where it's literally like, oh man, I'm about to die. And then that Decepticon they saved a while back that they built that little bond with comes in to save them at the last minute. And it's like, okay. It's hard not to notice that. Like, it would be cool if a Decepticon just helped them just because. Kind of like in season 1, but even that was kind of like, well, and I can't think of his name, but obviously, the giant jet that helps them out who switches teams. I always knew that he was an Autobot because that was like the big thing in the first season. I was like, he's supposed to be an Autobot. So I knew that switch was coming anyway. So it technically counts, but it was like knowing G1 stuff. I was like, well, he's just going to turn anyway because he's always meant to be an Autobot. So it was just kind of funny to see that happen twice. And I was like, that's weird. It's hard not to notice when it's like, oh, we saved them. We didn't have to save them, but we did. And then they saved us at the last minute during the giant battle. And I was like, you do it twice, and it's hard not to catch that. But I still enjoyed it. Thought it was cool, even though they might all be dead. By the way, giant explosion, and I was just like, cliffhanger. And I don't see how Alita 1 could be alive, but I like to think somehow they're going to say she is. But she was next to a bomb. The whole place blew up like an effing nuke. The people that were running away didn't even escape. Like, the ground was collapsing and it was fire and it was like hellfire everywhere. And everyone just fell into this pit of a, like, almost nuclear explosion. And I was like, I don't see how a single one of those characters is alive. I'm like, this is almost like straight up classic G1. Like, everyone that's on Cybertron is dead now. And then it's only the characters that are in space that are even alive. Because I was like, that was such a huge explosion. I don't see how they could live, but it's Transformers, it's TV, period. They're going to be fine. I like to think, at least, Alita 1 is going to, especially because Alita 1 was there with Shockwave, and I'm like, even though it's only 3 parts, so they could easily kill people off. That would be an insane way to do it, though, where it was like, we teased you, and then they're all dead. So that won't be happening. Like, some of those people are going to live. Some of those people could die. Especially those Decepticons that they helped, and it's just like, oh, they just helped them, and then that was it. They're probably dead. Like, they're not main Transformers. They're gone. So they'll probably die. But we'll see about everybody else. But I thought that was a crazy way to do that, because I'm like, this is nuts. This is like, that's such an insane explosion. So they could be dead. Somebody's got to go. But they do all that, and then we're going into, I think it was the last 3 episodes. So first, they hit us with time travel. And I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. It was like, at first it was like, oh, they're in like this, dead zone. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And we see that one freaking Transformer that I can never remember. But when I saw it, I was like, oh, I remember you. You're like the giant one. It's basically like Omega Supreme Giant. And then that dude that's in that episode that I can't remember. And so that was like the Autobot side. Like, oh, they're in like this specific zone. Okay, that makes sense. That they got transported because a portal blew up. They got sent to this dead zone. I was like, yeah, sure. Transformer science, I'll believe it. And then Megatron's thing hit, and it was just like, here's Galvatron, and I was like, okay. And it's just time travel now. And I was like, I don't mind it. I didn't hate it because it was Galvatron. And then that whole episode was so insane because then it just changed the game for what the series was. Because at first it was like, yeah, they're doing Transformers. It's a different thing. And then this episode was like, nope, Galvatron is here. Specifically, Transformers, the movie. I should have got that to it because I have that on Blu-ray. But Galvatron is here from the movie. And they made sure to be like, this is Galvatron from the Transformers, the movie. This isn't like our version of Galvatron. This is G1 Transformers Galvatron. That is the timeline that we're in. Somehow. I don't know how, but that's eventually where this show is supposed to lead, is actual G1 Transformers. Even when he goes away, when he gets captured by Unicron, which is amazing because they show Unicron and he has the crazy voice, they show like the green grid pattern from when Megatron was transformed into Galvatron. Like, they show that actual pattern just to hit it home a little bit further, to be like, make sure you remember this grid pattern because this is G1 Transformers, the movie. This is the continuity now. So I thought that was amazing. That in itself, the episode was cool. They showed Optimus die from the Transformers movie, like his whole body, turns gray and stuff. Then they show like the Nemesis Prime stuff. I was like, well, that's super cool. Like, they were going into the future. And then into the episode, Galvatron's like, oh man, I'm getting taken away. But there's still a way that I can help you. Use this. And when he threw out that golden disc, I'm telling you, it changed my life. Like, I couldn't believe, like, he threw that disc out and I had to pause for a second because I'm like, okay, I personally only know that golden disc from Beast Wars Transformers. And I was trying to like be simple about it and be like, okay, Transformers is a giant thing. It's like Ninja Turtles. There's tons of comics, tons of shows. I'm only familiar with the golden disc from Beast Wars, but that could easily just be a golden disc that exists within the Transformers universe. That's how I was honestly doing. I was like, I'm getting amped. It could just be a visual reference. It could exist in something outside of Beast Wars. But of course, as soon as I saw that gold disc, I thought Beast Wars. But I tried to rationalize. I was like, nah, don't get that excited. It just looks, it's meant to look like it as an homage to Beast Wars, just to represent Beast Wars. And then the final episode hit. So they go through their stuff. Scorponok was cool. Scorponok was actually like super cool and important in this, so that was kind of awesome. They go through, they have their arguments. Megatron almost dies, but Optimus won't do it. Classic thing. They have to survive. Quintesson comes in, very crazy. And so then they end up on Earth at the end, that in itself was weird. Because I'm like, well, what are they going to do for season 3? And so they man, They land on Earth, right? And they actually, here he is right here, boom. There you go. They show him, right? And so at first I was like, okay, once again, trying to be calm about it, trying to just be to rationalize it and be like, oh, that's cool. They're throwing out a nod because this specific, Velociraptor, not technically a Velociraptor, but thanks to Jurassic Park, we call them Velociraptors. That's not what they are. But this Velociraptor, it kind of looks like my dude. I was like, oh, that's a cool nod because of course they landed on Earth and they all get knocked out and stuff like that. Obviously, this continuity is very different, but it's like, oh yeah, that's cool. That's cool. I like how they're doing this. That's neat. And then he's looking, and it's Holden, right? And so he's looking. Like he turns around and he walks, and he's looking, and I'm like, cool reference. It was like the time between was starting to like click, and I'm like, okay, like only on there for like a second. Oh, this is a cool reference. They're holding for a little bit. They're holding it, and then he blinked, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, they're about to. I don't know what they're about to do. I don't know what's about to happen next. But I am so freaking excited for this part 3. I'm gonna be so mad at them if they screw this up because you can't be throwing out Beast Wars stuff and then show Beast Wars at the end and then just like drop the ball. I've never been so hyped for something Transformers. Like I could not, like, I seriously could not believe it because I'm like, it's not possible. I can't spoil it, but even though it's probably been spoiled, if you've been on the internet, you probably already know. I was kind of in the same vein watching this final scene as I was kind of with The Mandalorian Season 2. Not as much shock. It was just like, nah. It was that instant denial because I'm trying, you try to calm yourself down because you don't want to get too amped. And it was just like, nah, that's not, like, sure, the golden ring, the disc. Yeah, sure. But that was that was just a thing. Whatever. No biggie. They're holding on the shot a little long, but it's just a reference. No biggie. And when he blinked, I was just so happy. Like I haven't been this I haven't been this happy about Transformers in a long time. I don't read the comics. I don't have money like that to be buying comics every year, or every week. So I'm sure the comics have been amazing. Like Transformers is good. I haven't even watched a show in quite a while. I haven't watched a show since Prime. I think they've had like at least 2. I know that they did a show that was technically supposed to be like the sequel to Transformers Prime. I just never ended up getting into it. But for me personally, I was just like, okay, they got War for Cybertron, which is so good, even though they changed it from the games. But I was like, this is still fun. It's still great to see. Then they tied it in. They were like, yes, G1 Transformers, this is still that continuity. It's their version of it, because obviously the story from the movie or from the show is different from the games, which the games are technically canon. I don't know if that's changed since then. But I was like, okay, I'm excited. And then to be like, no, we're doing all of it. It's the War for Cybertron. It's the end of Cybertron all the way up to G1 Transformers. We're showing the far future. Then they crash, and it's like, no, we're doing the full continuity of Transformers. It's so crazy to me from beginning to what is basically the end. I mean, Beast Wars is technically like the end of the Transformers storyline. Like Beast Machines, like the sequel series to Beast Wars is. But that's literally like the encompassing story of all of Transformers from beginning to end. I mean, not counting obviously anything pre Optimus and Megatron and stuff like that. But War for Cybertron up to Beast Wars is basically the entire lifespan that exists for Transformers. And that's such a cool thing to be like, they have War for Cybertron, they show that it's in the G1 continuity. Obviously Beast Wars is as well, but the fact that they're actually showing them crash, and then they're gonna do whatever they're gonna do. They have to show the characters. I don't know. I mean, should I expect Rat Trap to just come in? Is Cheetah gonna be there? I don't ever know, man. It's so wild. It's so crazy to think. And then it's like, it doesn't even make sense because technically, that's why it's so different, because technically speaking, they don't crash and then the Beast Wars happens. Like, they're already on Earth by the time Beast Wars happens. When they get sent back in time, that's like the whole point, is that they find them later in the series. Like, oh man, the original, Autobots and Decepticons are actually on Earth already. They're already here on the ship. So they're already, technically changing the continuity, because the Beast Wars characters were sent back in time, but they still end up seeing it. So I don't know. I need to watch some other YouTube videos about this just to see if someone else is as excited as I am, because I don't know what they're going to do, but I cannot wait. I'm very excited. Obviously, like I just had to gush about it because I was just like, man, Beast Wars. I can't believe it. The entire continuity of Transformers is here now, beginning to end. At least the important stuff, important stuff. And I just don't know. And it's like slightly retconned because the Beast Wars were already, the Beast Wars were already happening when the G1 characters ended up landing on Earth, and so it's like it's technically a different timeline, but it's like just slightly off because the G1 stuff still happens in their timeline. Galvatron, Unicron, all that stuff still happens, and then eventually it leads to Beast Wars. But in this universe, the Beast Wars happen, and they see them. They see the original Transformers crash, and I'm just like, I don't know how that's gonna work or what it means, but it's so good. It's just so good. So I'm excited. I can't wait for part 3. I hope they don't drop the ball because I'm gonna be real upset with them. But man, it was a good season. Like that in itself, I already enjoyed the season. They did some good stuff with Megatron. Him going to Sector 12 or Sector 13, and he talked with them and was like, they're all left up. Shut it down. Like that was a good episode. I really did enjoy that. Him going through and dealing with Optimus, and Optimus trying to be too good and stuff like that, losing the matrix of leadership. That was so good. And then he hit him. Megatron hit him it was such a good moment. And he called him Orion Pax after he took the Matrix of Leadership. I was like, that is such a good burn that I feel like so many people watching were just gonna be like, But I was like, that is so disrespectful. It's amazing. It was such a good moment. I was like, that's such a good line for him to say. It was so good. So they did some amazing random stuff. As a giant G1 fan, just giant Transformers fan, just those moments, I was just like, I can't believe they're even doing it. So I don't know what's going to happen. Obviously, I'm losing my effing mind. I'm so excited. But I would love to know your thoughts on it. So please put your comments down in the comment section below. Let me know your favorite parts about this season, your least favorite parts. Obviously, what is happening next? What are they going to do to make like a new version of Beast Wars mixed with G1 Transformers? How is this going to work? How do they even remotely make this work without... Like, how do you even get in a slightly adjacent timeline where they get into the G1 stuff when they crash land and the Beast Wars are already happening? I would love to know your thoughts and theories on that, so please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.